to episode 5 of Bolt Action Tactica. This episode is about artillery. So there's two main types of artillery. There's anti-tank and howitzers. And they come in different weight classes. There's light, medium, heavy and super heavy. It's important to know what weight you're using because it affects movement and shooting. Options. They can take a gun shield, which is where it's taken for the added protection against enemy fire. Note, snipers ignore the gun shield rule, so snipers can still get around it, although they can't take out the whole of the artillery piece like they can with a team. You can take a spotter. Now, potentially increases the number of enemy units you can target. You can also hide your artillery behind terrain, so it can't be hit by enemy fire, but can still fire indirect at targets the spotter can see. So first, let's look at deployment and movement. Be wary of where you deploy your artillery. It's best to stick it to clear ground during the game. If you do deploy your artillery in rough ground or buildings when the battle begins, they will be unable to move or rotate for the duration of the game. Light and medium artillery can be moved by the gun crew. To move, you assign your order dice to the unit as normal, but the orders work slightly different. So an advanced order allows you to turn the gun on the spot and fire. The -1 penalty to hit still applies for using an advanced order. Note that if the gun has a rotating platform or turntable that allows rotation, then the gun can be given a fire order and can pivot in place before firing. If you use to move, you have to use a run order. Now, a run order will let the crew push the gun up to 6 inches. As with the normal run order, no shooting is allowed. Now, heavy and super heavy artillery can only be moved by a tow. An advance order, as with light and medium artillery, this allows you to turn the gun on the spot and fire. Again, the -1 penalty to hit still applies for using an advanced order, and if it's got a rotation platform, again you can use a fire order to give it 360 degrees and point in any direction it wants. Now the difference between light, medium and heavy and super heavy is when it comes to movement. So you need to place a run order as you do with a light medium, but with the super heavy and heavy, it allows the gun to be unlimbered and placed within 6 inches from the back of the transport. Now, if the transport performed a run move, then the gun cannot be unlimbered. And also make sure you have a vehicle that can tow your gun. If you start with the gun in reserve for any reason and you don't have a tow rated for the gun, then it won't take part in the game and it will count it being destroyed at the end of the game. So make sure whatever you choose for the tow is rated to tow the gun on. Shooting. So there are anti-tank guns and howitzers. I'll talk about the easy one first, the anti-tank gun. If you fire anti-tank rounds, then you will most likely be shooting at a vehicle. You give your gun a fire order, choose a target within your gun's firing arc and line of sight, measure the range of the target, add any modifiers for range, cover, etc. Roll to hit. If you hit, you roll another d6 and add this to your anti-tank pen value. If it's higher than the target's armor rating, then you've scored a hit and can roll on the vehicle damage table. If you beat the target's armor by more than 3, you've caused massive damage. So you roll 2d6s on the vehicle damage table and you apply both results to the vehicle. If you roll and you equal the armor value of the vehicle, it's a glancing hit. So you see, firing anti-tank rounds is fairly straightforward. Now it gets a bit more complicated firing HE, high explosives. And if you remember last week, I mentioned about not putting snipers in buildings. Well, in this section, you're going to realize the reason behind that. So first off, let's use indirect fire. So can be used to shoot over intervening models, buildings or terrain as long as you have line of sight to the target. So this is where we're saying like you can put your artillery behind a building or whatever And as long as your spotter can see what you're shooting at, you can shoot over a building using indirect fire. It's really good. It works the same as a mortar. So the only problem with firing indirect is your artillery has a minimum range of 24 inches. So you can't shoot at anything within 24 inches if you're firing indirect. To shoot indirect, you give your gun a fire order, choose your target within your gun's firing arc, line of sight of the gun spotter obviously has to be over the minimum range and within the maximum range of the weapon. You roll a d6 and you hit on a 6. So this way, say it works like a mortar. You hit on a 6 first time. If you don't move, the enemy doesn't move, then you zero in, and then it's a 5 next turn and a 4, depending on whether you move or not. Now, if you hit, the defending player, if they haven't used their order dice, can choose to go down. If you use the corresponding template to determine how many models have been hit, then you half it if the defending player has gone down. Roll a d6 for every hit. Again, apply the pen modifier according to the size of the HE hit and remove any casualties. You then have to roll for pin markers. Again, depending on the HE value, the target taking anything from D2 to D6 pins. Now, you got direct fire. So shooting at targets using the open sights, you've got no minimum range. Basically, you're aiming the gun down the barrel and shooting at what you can see. So again, this is similar to firing an 80 round, except using HE, of course. So to shoot direct fire, you give the gun a fire order, choose a target within your gun's firing arc and line of sight of the gun, measure the range to see if the target is in range. I say, unlike direct fire, you roll d6 and you need 3+ to hit. So with indirect, you're firing like a mortar, you need a 6 to hit it first. With firing direct, you're firing like you do a normal weapon, so you need a 3+ to hit. Then you got your range modifiers, small team, cover, etc. So as with indirect fire, if you hit, the defending player, if they haven't used their order dice, can choose to go down. You use the corresponding template to determine how many models are being hit. Then half it if the defending player has gone down. Roll a 6 again, roll a 6 for each hit, applying the pen modifier according to the size of the HE, and remove any casualties. You then have to roll for pin markers again, and again it's anything from a D2 to D6 pins. D6 pins on a squad, it can really nobble them. Okay, and here's the special thing I was on about. So HE versus buildings. So if you deploy sniper team or anything in a building and your opponent has HE, your chances are you're going to be on the receiving end of this. So when firing over open sights, you simply choose the unit you are aiming for, regardless of if you can see the target or not. You're shooting the building itself. So you measure the range and line of sight to the wall, ignoring cover. So if you can see the building, you can shoot at it. If you hit, the shell has gone through the wall and exploded inside the building, hitting the unit inside. So equal to the damage in the building value of the HE charts. So on the HE chart at the back of the book, there's damage for hitting things in the open, and there's a column on HE hits for inside buildings. So if you're shooting at a building, use the inside buildings chart. Yeah, and again, if they haven't used their order dice this turn, they can choose to go down. So then you half the hits if the defending player has gone down. Roll a d6 for each hit and apply the pen modifier according to the size of the HE. Remove any casualties. You then have to roll for pin markers again. As before, it can take anything from D2 to D6 pins. Now, here's the crutch as such. If the HE hitting the building has a value greater than 2d6, now depending on the size of the HE, you go 1d6, 2d6, 3d6 and 4d6. So 2d6 is a medium. I think it's a medium howitzer will cause 2d6 hits. So the value from the 2d6 is possible to bring the building down. So you roll a number of hits scored before the unit has gone down. So if you get 10 hits, the building will collapse with everyone in it. So indirect fire works the same, except what happens is you hit the roof first. So you roll a dice, and on a 4 up, the shell explodes on the top floor. If you roll a 3 or less, the shell goes through the floor to the next floor down. Again, you roll the dice again. On a 4 up, it explodes on that floor. If it's 3 or less, it goes through that floor down to the next floor, and so on right the way down through the building till it hits the ground floor. When it hits the ground floor, it explodes anyway. Now, it only affects anybody that is on that floor. So if your guy is on the first floor and the shell goes through the first floor and explodes on the ground floor, it doesn't kill you. However, as before when I said about the size of the HE shell, if it's 2d6 or more, there's still a possibility that it can bring the building down. So the shell might not directly hit you, but even if the shell explodes on the floor above you or below you, you still have to do the rolls because there's a possibility the building could come down. And it's happened to me. I've had a 7-man squad inside a building, and Churchill with this big massive howitzer on it, I can't forget what it is now, the engineer one, and it fired HE, and it fired and it hit with 4d6, and I think they got 14 hits on the building. So the building collapsed and I lost all 7 guys inside it. That was a bit of a shock, to be honest. I've still not learned. I still put my sniper inside buildings. Then I see me opponent, even though I've looked at my opponent's army beforehand, I've seen they've got a tank with a gun on it. I see they've got a howitzer. I see they've got a mortar team. I still put my sniper in a building. Complete madness. But hopefully next time I play, I won't. I'll remember, and I won't put anybody inside buildings. Okay guys, so that's it. I hope you found that useful. A bit of insight into artillery and its uses. It's really good for adding pins to things, really, more than anything. If you kill, great, but the main reason for artillery, especially if you're using HE, is add pins, because everything adds more than 1 pin. Normal guns, anti-tank gun, if you fire an anti-tank gun and you hit it, don't kill it, you'll do 1 pin. If you fire a medium howitzer at something, you'll do D3 pins. So howitzers, HE, really good in the game. I recommend you should have at least 1 mortar or a howitzer in your list. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see and you want to see more, then please hit the subscribe button. If you want to be really, really good and you want to support the channel, then please click on the link and support me through Patreon. Thanks again.